This is Simon Nielsen coming to you from Copenhagen with a deck tech from the Arena Championships. Not many online tournaments these days, but I do get to qualify for this event, which is like 32 players, pretty high stakes, and it is historic. So once again, me and my team, got down on 30 and tried to figure out the historic metagame. Mostly we expected red-black variants and Jund and so on to be the most popular decks, and we really tried to find it at an archetype that was able to go over the top of them while still being very resilient. That's like super key ability to have against red-black, and preferably also somewhat flexible. And then it needed to be something that's powerful enough to be good in any other random matchup you might encounter. And we found this build of a Reanimator. So the main plan here is that you have your Atraxa, which is an incredible new angel from the newest set here, that it's just, you know what Atraxa does. It does all sorts of stuff and stabilizes the game and gets you more interaction and so on. And then you have like these, 8 ways to get it back from the graveyard if you can manage to discard it. So yeah, Priest of Hell Rights and Imperial Rights. Both of these cards are notable because they also like they're both like protected from discard themselves by having Flashback and Unearth. So like they're really good to discard for value, and if the opponent has Thoughtseize, they can't really interact with them, which is the resilient part of the deck. Then as for discard outlets, we decided that we're not actually trying to be a Faithless looting deck. Like normally you would think that looting just goes in any Reanimation deck. I mean, it's a super powerful card. It's banned in Modern. It's legal here. Phoenix plays it in this format, and it obviously like Reanimation decks in like Legacy and so on play Faithless looting. So like, why wouldn't I play it here? But this is kind of a different style of Reanimator, because like usually you think of like the Reanimation style as something that's all in and trying to do something busted really early, but it doesn't have to be like that. Reanimation can also just be like an extra value tool in a more mid-range game plan. And the issue with Faithless looting is that it does nothing but discard. You actually don't have that many cards that are interesting to discard. You only have the 4 Atraxas. You have many other ways to discard them that are just better cards by themselves. So you might have your, you have your Fable of the Mirror Breaker, just like a great card overall. Pairs really well with Bloodside Harvester. We've seen this in mid-range decks. The red-black decks in this format also play this combination. And both of these are also discard outlets, incidentally. And you have Crucius. This one I really want to highlight. It's like the most important card in the deck. From the Brothers War Alchemy set. Just an incredibly powerful card by itself. And in this deck especially, like it's not only a discard outlet, it's also a way for you to tutor up Atraxa, because you can discard Imperial Rights to it and say higher. So this actually means that like normally you would have to put if you're playing a Reanimator strategy, you have to put a bunch of really expensive creatures in your deck to reanimate, and that can clunk up your draw. But this deck, because of the Crucius interaction to tutor up Atraxa, you don't need to do that. You can just run Crucius. And Crucius also makes treasures, and that actually matters a lot, especially with Fable as well. You're just sometimes able to hardcast Atraxa. It actually comes out pretty often that you're gonna assemble 2 treasures and hardcast it. The rest of the deck, obviously, like since we play this like mid-range, like since the like actual combo is only like these 12 cards, the rest you just get to play normal mid-range Magic, and that means like having Fatal Pushes. They're great at being enabled in this deck with all the treasures and harvesters. Thoughtseize, of course. We have an extra Inquisition. I want to talk about Fragment Reality for a bit. Also gonna open the sideboard here. So Fragment Reality is, we found like a really flexible answer to stuff like Hers, stuff like Rest in Peace, Thomas Crypt, whatever, like all these graveyard hate type cards. But it can also answer 1-drops really well. We were concerned about mono green, so like hitting Elvish Mystics and so on is very good. But even against stuff like Cathays, you exile the Mox Diamonds. Against Jund, you exile the Goyce and the Croxas, and you don't get anything, right? Because it just happens very often that people just don't really play cheap cards. And we were so impressed with this card. We actually ended up being like, we should just play 4 in 75 and probably play 2 of the main deck. It's just nice to have that extra bit of removal. It's pretty important. A lot of times with Atraxa, you hit 1 mana removal, so you need to like have a certain density of it. Also think about that when you're sideboarding. That like having enough like density of 1 mana removal definitely matters. So yeah, I think this card is kind of impressive, and I would expect to like people will be more aware of it and play it more often in Historic going forward. Just a super powerful card. One other thing here I want to highlight is the power of Friction Scrapyard. So this is one of the newest cards from the like Phyrexia All-Will-Be-One Alchemy set, and to Struck Our Eyes is like something super powerful. Just like before we even built this deck, it's like it's a discard land on a land super efficiently, and what it makes is like very relevant cards. It's just more lands. Makes it much easier to cast on Burial Rites if you just like don't actually need to draw your land drops to do it. The Soul in the Phyrexia doesn't come up that often. Usually you're either losing the game anyway, or you're winning the game anyway, so it doesn't really make a difference. But yeah, it's a fun one to keep an eye out for. But mostly it's just like, when you have on Burial Rites, Atraxa, and Friction Scrapyard, like, Thoughtseize just does nothing against you, because they can't interact with your combo at all, and that's like really where the resiliency of this deck comes from. Sadly, we can only run 2 copies of this card. It is really, really good, but in a Mardu mana base with the colorless land, it doesn't really work out so well, and it's pretty bad to draw on multiples, obviously, because, I mean, then you don't need that many scrapyards. Another card to highlight here is Gigantha. It's like, usually a deck would be like, oh yeah, we can play Gigantha. Yeah, because we just happen to like, align with it, and we just put it in our sideboard, and it like, one game out of 20, it like does something. It's like a 5/5 blocker, and that's cool and all. This deck does something else other than like the regular Gigantha stuff, because it taps for a beautiful amount of mana that's just able to hardcast Atraxa. So the fact that like, I already mentioned that with the treasures you can hardcast Atraxa, that definitely comes up, especially once your opponent presented you with like an unlicensed search. You can sometimes just kind of ignore it, and just say, okay, well, I'm just not gonna use my reanimation cards. I'm just gonna play my Atraxa while you were fiddling around with your like, trying to find graveyard hate. That plan can be super strong. And obviously, you always have access to that in any game if you can make the game go long enough. That's just a game plan in itself. The other thing it does is that it's a 5-drop to discard to Crucius to find Atraxa. So you won't always have the Burial Rites, but that doesn't mean that Crucius won't be able to tool up Atraxa. You just need to like set that up a little bit first. So like those abilities of the card makes it really, really good. And I would like strongly advise that like any changes you might make to this deck, consider if they're worth doing if they ruin your Gigantha. This also matters for post-board. The cyber cards I want to touch on, Serra Emissary. This is kind of like your backup threat against decks that can beat Atraxa. This would be like Goblins, sometimes Affinity, sometimes Auras. Like these decks can just beat Emissary, they can beat Atraxa by just attacking through it or whatever. Like just a 7/7 lifelink is not good enough to contain them. But Emissary naming creature is good enough. And so that's kind of your game plan. Obviously, you'll be playing in closed decklist on ladder and so on, so you might not know if this is actually safe to bring in. At least we have the knowledge. But sometimes it's fine to take a risk, and you can also sometimes name instant with it and then protect it. That comes out in the mirror a lot, where you also just bring in like all your emissaries and just have a ton of big things to reanimate. Lastly with the sideboard, we added to Lantern really, really late. That's like, we found the Kethis deck like 5 hours before deckless submission. It was like 3 AM. And we were hoping that other people wouldn't find it. Other people did find it. The deck is kind of broken. I would advise you to have more lands in your sideboard. Maybe instead of Brotherhood Zen, maybe instead of these needles. They're fine against Kethis, but they just get blown up by Loran and Boseiju. And they were mostly here to name Karn out of the mono green deck, but that deck doesn't really seem to exist right now anyway. Then obviously we got some Graveyard Hate that also answers hers and Affinity decks. And yeah, that's kind of how the deck is built. One other change is that I would cut Savai Triome for Forsaken Crossroads. That card, I just kind of forgot about it, but I think it's just clearly better. And you can also sometimes name green or blue with it, so it does help hardcast Atraxa, which is kind of cool. So if you add one at least of those. And yeah, that is my deck tech for you. See you in the matches coming up.